From Accord, this is From Vendorship to Partnership, a show where we dive into the realities of scaling startups. This season, Accord's CEO, Ross Rich, chats with the next generation of startup founders about the ups and downs of signing their first customers while building a repeatable, collaborative sales process.
Hey everyone, welcome to our next session of the Founder's Journey. We're joined by the sales legend and founder of Atrium, Pete. If you can give yourself a little intro bio for the folks that might not have heard of you, that'd be an awesome way to kick off.
Yeah, sure. My name is Pete Kazanjy. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. We make data-driven sales management software that helps sales teams use data to improve team and rep performance. Prior to this, I ran a software company called TalentBin, was a recruiting software company that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And so that was kind of like the place where I cut my teeth on go-to-market stuff. Prior to that, I was a product marketer, product manager, kind of business generalist at VMware. And when I first joined started TalentBin, it was pretty quickly. We were like, somebody needs to sell this stuff. Turns out this stuff doesn't sell itself. It's kind of weird. So I kind of was our first rep, first manager, sales leader. We were eventually bought by Monster, and then kind of out of that, I ended up writing a book on early stage startup sales called Founding Sales, which
super helpful book. Yes.
Yeah, glad you like it.
Awesome. Well, appreciate the quick overview there. To dive right into things and kind of a good segue from what you just shared, would love to hear the founding story from yourself. What was the decision like to, you sold this company, learned a ton about sales, wrote this book, helping a ton of people out there. What made you want to dive back in?
Just like self-loathing, clearly.
Yes. Exactly. Why again?
Why again?
You were there.
I don't know. That's why you sound like my wife. Why, Pete? Why? Yeah. So I think the kind of the story behind Atrium is related, like the seeds of it were planted at TalentBin. So, TalentBin, as I was learning initial go-to-market, kind of a process guy by background, and just kind of like systems thinking and what have you. My dad's a mechanical engineer. I'm not a satisficer, I'm a maximizer. And so what I kind of quickly realized is like, sales organizations, they're kind of just like these like factories, right? That produce revenue. Like leads come in the front, reps do certain things to them, or like SDR does something, AE does something, CSM does something. And so ended up like instrumenting the heck out of that at TalentBin. And then when we were acquired by Monster, it was kind of like this weird awakening moments where I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like I'm gonna go and lead new product sales at this big kid sales organization. Like they'll clearly really know what they're doing more so than we did at TalentBin. I mean, come on. And then when we got there, it was just like the opposite. It was like bedlam. And I was like, holy mackerel! Like I guess we were really dramatically better at instrumenting the quantity and quality of selling behavior that was going on our sales team than certainly this large company. And then kind of started pulling on that thread a little bit more. We realized that most organizations were just like very
it wasn't unique.
Yeah, it wasn't unique. And I was like, this like seems like something that could be turned into software, and like I really like it and I'm good at it. So maybe we'll go and do that. And that's kind of where Atrium came from.
That's awesome. I love how it came from you're just pure experience. And it honestly sounds so similar to, joining Stripe for a sales, job, whatever. Oh, yep. People they're going to have this figured out. We're going to jump in. It's going to be like this thing. No, just get on calls, write follow-up email. Like where's the structure, the best practices, the frameworks, the whatever to doing this, to generating revenue for every company out there that doesn't exist. So really, really resonates my experience as well. Well, something that I know you wrote quite a bit on, both in Founding Sales as well as a really great article that I saw on First Round about getting early customers, talking to them. Would love to hear your thoughts on the approach to winning your first 10 customers. Also, I think there's a great quote in Impossible to Inevitable. If you can get one, you can get two, and whatever, 5 to 10. And once you get 10, like you're up and running. But that seems to be the hardest thing, getting those first 10 customers. Would love to hear your experience with that.
Yeah. So I think the way I would think about that, so there's a deck kind of floating around on the web called Founder-Led Selling. It's kind of like a companion deck that I oftentimes present. I like to say it's the pictures and words version of founding sales, or companion piece. And it's really just like there's a series of stages, right? And it's not like you just jump out there and you're like, all right, cool, let's sell to like 10 people. It's more kind of like the first stage is, do we know what problem we're actually solving? And so the best way of figuring that out is to do really good customer development interviews. So Steve,
that's what I was referring to. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So like, Steve Blank does a lot of writing on this. 4 Steps to the Epiphany, Startups Owner's Manual, Eric Ries as well. There's also a really good article on First Round Review called Get in the Van by Michael Sippy. He's a product leader. I think he's at Medium.
Great one. Yeah.
I think he's at Medium now. So you just want to do a good job of like doing rigorous interviews. And so you want to, in order to validate that this like problem actually exists, right? It's kind of like the Paul Graham thing of like make something that people want. Well, the first thing you need to do is like validate that people actually like have this problem, and maybe that your hypothesis seems right. And so if you do, 50 of those, it's kind of just a conversion funnel. You do 50 of those, maybe you do like 50 to 100. We did about 150 in kind of like late, late 2015, early 2016. Because you want to, if you're going to put time into it, you want to make sure into the startup, you want to make sure that you're not going to like chasing, going down a dead end, right?
Yeah. I just know how hard it is to not just jump in though, right? Like I, share the same philosophy. That's all we could do at the very beginning because we weren't engineers, but like 150, that's awesome. And like, I think that just pays you forward so much. Yeah.
Like you do that. And then what comes out of that is like, well, first you answer the question like, okay, cool. This definitely smells like there's a problem here that can be solved. Ideally, then what you can do is you can kind of pull a customer advisory panel out of that. Wrote another article on First Round Review on customer advisory boards. That's actually you can just Google Kazanjy, customer advisory boards. And so like if you kind of, what you can do is you can kind of like pull the cleverest folks out of there. And so like maybe you get a couple dozen of those folks and then you start building, it gets your MVP. And then what you're doing is you're kind of like recursing back to those, like looping back with those folks. Hey, does this make sense? We're on the right track, And then you can do your early alpha there. And so like, that's like, it all kind of just folds together, right? Because those customer development conversations, they end up like really just being like disco conversations, like discovery totally. Chats. And then you just like use their pain points against them later on. Like, hey, 9 months later, remember you said you had these massive pain points? I imagine you probably still do. Like let's have you use Accord, or let's have you use Atrium, right? And then it'll just kind of convert. If the product solves the problem, fits the market, which it won't to start, you'll kind of get those natural conversions. And like that's the best way to approach it, in my opinion.
Totally. And I love that this is like a framework. It's not like, hey, you have an idea and you need to build the thing and then sell the thing. It's like there's these different steps and stages in that deck. We're gonna have to link all of this stuff out that we've mentioned in this post. But that was kind of, my process. I've never built software before, never built a company before, all this kind of stuff. It's like, let's just think about this in steps and stages, so much less overwhelming. And you make sure you don't miss these key points. It's been interesting chatting with, later stage founders, even like, Series B, C, where things are stalling. And what I hear consistently is like, we had to revisit product market fit. We had to revisit our ideal customers. They found, I don't want to call it luck. They had great intuition, but it wasn't written down. It wasn't framework to get there, and there was missing pieces. Which I think bridges well to the next question around product market fit. Everyone has a different frame of mind on this, what the words mean, when you're there, et cetera. Would love to hear how you thought about product market fit with Atrium.
Yeah, I think it took us a while here. So like my buddy Lenny had Lenny Rachitsky, who does, I call him the professor because he's like
brilliant guy. Yes.
Yeah. Well, he also just does this amazing research. He's like the only person doing original research right now, and it's fantastic. But I was giving him shit because he had this recent post was talking about like how long it had taken people to get to product market fit, and someone was like, "Oh, it was like 9 months," and I was like, "It was like Lyft or something." They're like, "Oh, it was like no amount of time. I was like, that's bullshit. You guys were fucking Zimride first. Shut up, right? Like
every company. This is every company, no matter how well you understand the market. I totally agree with you on this. Yeah.
Anyway, but the point is, like, part of this is probably sour grapes too, because like, what Atrium does is we tackle this really hard problem, which is we help line managers, just like regular human beings, like use data and metrics in order to improve team performance. And the problem is that historically, the reason why people struggle with this is because humans suck at math, and they hate to do it, and they hate looking at charts, and which, God bless, they should, right? Because like our eyes are not, designed to be like, statistics calculators. And so what Atrium does is just abstracts it all away and it automates it. So instead it's like, hey, Rich, your rep right here has a your rep right here has a win rate problem. Like this rep has a win rate problem. This rep has an ASP problem. Susie's crushing it because of X, Y, Z, and it just does all that calculation for you. Problem is, it took a long time for us to get there because like early versions of it were just like terrible. Just like, Ross, there's this problem, there's this problem, there's this problem. People are like, whoa, this is too loud, and et cetera, et cetera. So it took us a hot second to get there, but when we knew we were there, is you could just see it in the utilization, right? Like you could see, yeah, you could see these managers who had historically, because I'm sure you probably saw this with your managers. Managers just focus on deals, where it's like that's not really the way of like the high leverage way of managing a sales team, right? Like it's important to look at metrics as well, and so people just spend all their time in the deals. But then what we really saw was that these people who had historically been like math phobes, now like they were just like slavishly opening the Atrium alert emails. They were in Atrium all the time. They were on rep profile pages ahead of one-on-ones, and so on and so forth. And like you would see it in the NPS as well, right? Like this is one of the problems with like NPS is like okay. One of the problems is that sometimes people won't answer NPS because they don't want to hurt your feelings. So that's why like
so you're missing some of the bad ones, and maybe you get some more good ones of people that are stoked. And
yeah, exactly. So the proof is in the pudding. Like you got to look at the utilization and make sure that people are like the dogs are actually eating the dog food. So when we saw that, we're like, all right, cool. Like we've taken non-technical, non-metrical users, and we've given them superpowers. Like they're now in here, seeing around corners in a way that historically they would have never been able to do, or relied on like a sales ops analyst to do for them. And so like, we're off to the races. And that was like, only what year is it right now? I don't know. Right? It's like
exactly 2021. I think.
Is this still the pandemic? I can't remember. I think this is the thing with startups. Is like we just did like turn that corner at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, like right into the jaws of the pandemic.
Perfect.
Right? Yeah, exactly. We're just like, oh man, we just hit product market fit. I got a couple of reps. So they're like, repeatedly selling. This is great. Like we're gonna go fundraise. Oh, what's going on in China? So it was, but that's startups, right? Like that's just how it goes.
Yeah, no, and you got to be long-term thinking, right? It's like you put in that work, and it's not just it's just me miss this moment. Awesome. Last couple questions here. So you went through that product market fit, pandemic, et cetera, bringing on new reps, amazing funding round. Would love to hear where you're at today and what how you're thinking about the next few years. Like what you made it past those like the really, really, really hard days to get things up and running. Momentum behind your back, where are things going?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, this is kind of the crux of like Atrium, and how SaaS go-to-markets work, right? Like we're just adding reps, just add the reps, load them up, instrument them, make sure that they're at productivity. Oh, your win rate is in band with everybody else. Your deal cycle is the same as everybody else. Okay, cool. Let's add more. Do it again, and that's kind of the stage that we're at right now. The good news is we have pretty sick software to instrument the health of that ramp, oddly enough.
It must be exciting to be able to obviously I'm sure you were dogfooding before from day one, but like growing the team like this, having the layers, and then you're going to have middlemen, and then you're all that kind of stuff. I think this is going to be probably a really exciting time for your product team.
It's totally rad. And it's also super rad for our reps too. It's great from a recruiting standpoint.
You get to experience it like that. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, like they get to experience it. They use it themselves. They're all kind of like, geeked out on their own. Like there's a non-trivial component of like self-management going on there. It's also a really neat kind of like recruiting story as well, because one of the things my reps have to really be good at, and this is what we were talking about before the show, on kind of like having good authoritative, like consultative salespeople. All of my reps learn they learn how to be amazing at data-driven sales management by virtue of what they're doing, right? So what I tell my reps and people that I'm recruiting is that there's going to be this like hilarious Atrium sales management diaspora where like everybody just comes out of Atrium.
Managers, yeah.
Right. They're just going to be, like maybe they'll be like maybe a little bit like too robotic and like too left-brained or what have you. But I guess in general, given the fact that you have like a pendulum thing, like, we'll be we'll be dragging the entire population of sales management more towards like the metrical side of things. So yeah, that's what we're doing is just we're at 8 reps right now. I've got 3 that are in ramp. I just spent 3 hours a day doing pitch training with them. And then we're going to get these kids up to success. And then we're just going to do another 3 in a couple months and just like bust it out. I mean, this is what happens when you go through the investment curve and you get the product to fit the market, you develop the sales motion, you document the sales motion, you have all the collateral and the the workflows and the decision trees and all that jazz. And at that point, it's just like, you've now developed the software, if you will, like the sales software. And it's just about, and now like you get to reap the rewards of that massive investment, which is good because, usually the massive investment is like, it's like the joke I like to say is that like, oh yeah, I'm sure that there's some marshmallows at the bottom of this bowl of glass that you just have to like eat your way through in order to get to the marshmallows. Right. Yeah, so when you get to the marshmallows, you're like, yeah, all right, sweet.
Totally. Well, I'm looking forward to that moment as well. For us, we're still enjoying that glass, but no, you get those wins along the way, and it feels like you get there. I don't know. You can see it.
Yeah, the good news is you can kind of see the marshmallows down there through the glass. You're like, oh yeah, it's gonna be
dark analogy, Pete. That's a dark analogy, but I'm into it. Well, shifting gears. Last question here. My personal favorite is if you could go back to day one of Atrium. I'm sure you learned a lot from Talman, but at Atrium, first day, what single piece of advice would you give yourself?
I would just say everybody just needs to be super close to the customer as much as possible. And so you might hear that and you'd be like, wait a minute, you're like the seller, right? Like, yeah, what the hell were you doing? And
you were on the bus. You were driving it. You were doing all the great best practice stuff. Yeah.
Right. But I think what you need to do is you got to get other people there too. Right. And that means, I think this is one of the challenges that organizations have is they're like, oh, we got to protect our developers' attention, or, product management can spend their time, moving Jira tickets around, and I mean, hopefully not Jira tickets, Jesus, linear tickets around or Clubhouse tickets around. Sorry, I digress. Or like deep in PRDs or whatever. And I think the important thing is just to make sure that like people are, infused with the voice of the customer. And there's good things like, we're big Chorus customers. We use the hell out of that, but just like driving that as much as possible back into the product apparatus, just to like make sure that those loops are as fast as possible. And that kind of goes to the analytics stuff as well. Just making sure that you're, way on top of your product analytics as soon as possible, just to make sure that like, because you have this, if you've done the work in order to understand that people have this problem, and then you're proposing solutions to it, that's fine. But, people may say that they enjoy it or they may whatever, but like you want to actually like see what's going on there and be so at this point, like we have Amplitude, we have Full Story, we've got, got a bunch of other stuff. I know that there's stuff that's even like further upstream, kind of like UserLeap and some other folks there kind of like help you just like get more data as soon as possible. Like, are we on the right track? Are the dogs actually eating the dog food? The more like, I feel that you'll be like hard pressed to overdo that.
Yeah, totally.
Like the opposite.
Good reminder. And not just, like you said, not just the frontline folks, but how do you get everyone else to get those insights? Is it product stuff? Is it Chorus or Gong? Is it just joining calls? I totally agree. Well, how should people get in touch with you if they wanted to either connect personally or learn more about Atrium?
Yeah, well, I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn and Twitter because I'm the only Peter Kazanjy in the United States. probably in Canada as well. So I'm a very easy,
to be confirmed.
TBD. I'm a very easy Google, and then I mean, if people have Atrium is phenomenal. Like we've got a couple hundred customers, got like an NPS of like 80 or so. People really love it because it gives their SDR managers and AE managers superpowers. So if you have a sales organization that has, north of 5 or 10 reps, Atrium is really fantastic. It'll really help the organization improve themselves using data. So check us out.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for the time, Pete. Appreciate it.
Cool.
You're listening to Accords from Vendorship to Partnership, where we dive into building startups, signing customers, and scaling collaborative, repeatable sales processes. For more episodes like this, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for listening.